Death by Bunjie.
Did my doe jump the string? Did it duck the arrow? Originally, my crossbow doe from this year, doe number 1 of 2017, I just posted that video. Originally, when I edited that video, when I went back and looked at the footage, I put it all together. I was of the opinion that that deer did not jump the string. I thought it wasn't an issue. I didn't think that explained the reason that the shot went a little bit high. A number of people on the YouTube channel commented to that video saying, yeah, I think that was the problem. I think it actually ducked the string a little bit. So I went back and looked at it. I'm going to show you my analysis of it, the analysis of that shot, the shot analysis. That is this video, that is this episode of Death by Bunjie. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do most of that on the computer, because that is the handiest way to do it. I think it is just a great way to do it in terms of showing you and being able to slow down the footage. Now, the first thing I want to point out about this particular shot, about this hunt, is this is the kind of shot I don't mind taking. I've mentioned it over and over. I don't like to shoot at alert deer, especially if they're more than 20 yards away. A 20-yard shot's probably okay. But generally speaking, this deer wasn't on alert, wasn't on high alert. This deer wasn't aware of my presence, wasn't looking at me in a tree stand. Now, in this particular hunt, I was hunting in a blind in front of the 100-year-old apple tree, you might remember. Sitting down there in a blind, I'm at eye level with this deer, but I am confident, after reviewing the footage, confident while I was sitting there, that this deer was not aware that I was in the blind. The deer's aware of the blind. The deer is a little bit nervous about the blind, but the deer is not aware of my actual personal presence. I didn't make any sounds, the deer didn't hear me, wasn't anything like that. That certainly can happen, but that wasn't the case here. Here, unlike all the other deer, if you watch that video, the deer are coming in from all directions. There are 7 total does coming in here. So there's 7 deer coming to this apple tree looking for apples, and they're running every which way. They're running all over the place. And those deer couldn't care less about the blind. They're just following the lead doe here and doing whatever she does and letting her take care of security, I guess. So she's looking at the blind, though. She's looking for movement. She's a little cautious, but I wouldn't say she's on alert. I would say she is cautious. That's really the word that I would use. You can see, though, that she is looking at the blind even at the time of the shot. So that's not necessarily the best shot in the world to take, but under the circumstances, given that she was cautious but not really on alert, I'm okay with that shot, and I was okay taking the shot. And that explains, I just want you to know why I took that shot. I've taken shots like that a dozen or more times with great success. And in this case, obviously, I did recover this deer, so it wasn't much of a problem in that respect either. Certainly something to take into consideration, though. One of the things I can do here in the software that I think is really cool is I can superimpose the Bunjie triangle. I'll freeze it right here where you see that this is right before I pull the trigger. I'm able to freeze it right at that instant, right before the trigger is pulled. And I can superimpose what I like to call the Bunjie triangle on that deer so that you can see where I'm aiming. Where is the triangle? What is the point? My aim is going to be at the front portion of that triangle, given the position of the deer. The deer is very, very, very slightly angled toward me, but it is a very good shot because I consider this a broadside shot. I don't have any problem taking this shot. I have made this exact shot dozens of times, like literally more than a dozen times, probably 24 times. This is probably the most common shot that I make with a crossbow, or that I'm confronted with. In this particular instance, I'm aiming in the front corner of that triangle, the one that's right behind that. I want to stick it right in that pocket behind the front shoulder, hug that shoulder, get it in there. And if you're interested in that Bunjie triangle, I suggest you go watch another video of mine where I explain what that is. I kind of came up with it on a whim, and it does fit for what I'm talking about for illustrating this. So especially for these shot analysis videos, I'll be referring to that Bunjie triangle. So go ahead and watch that other video. But in this particular case, I can superimpose that triangle on here and show you what I'm thinking. And I'm thinking, let's shoot on the front end of that triangle, the very front point of that. So that's pretty much what I'm aiming at, all right? We don't aim at the triangle, just like we don't aim at the deer or the shoulder. We aim at a very specific point. You have to be very specific about where you're aiming. And I think if I hit the front of that triangle, I get a pass through on that deer. I hit both lungs, maybe even hit the heart. That deer is going to die very quickly. It won't run very far, just out of sight, and I'll go find that deer. In this particular case, of course, we know already that shot goes high. The Luminoc, what a great tool. First of all, There are two great tools here I want to talk about. The first thing is, if you're not filming in your hunts, work in that direction. I don't think everybody needs to film their hunts, but what a great tool it is. Even when you make a good shot, the deer runs off, I can evaluate the footage before I decide how quickly I want to go after that deer. Tracking is a lot easier, a lot more easy to make a plan for if you have footage to evaluate and not just your memory. So I like to have footage. So I film all my hunts, and I generally don't take shots if I don't have it on film. That's just the way I do things. But I'm not saying everybody needs to be that way. But boy, what a great tool footage can be. So consider working in that direction if you don't already film your hunts. If you want some tips on that, check out my other videos. I do a whole series, a whole playlist of videos on how to film your own hunts. So you can go and watch those, and hopefully it covers all the bases. And if you have new questions or new ideas for videos, I'll make more videos about it. I like that stuff, so I'm happy to answer any questions I can about it. I'm no expert on this stuff, but I will share what I know, and if I got some advice for you or tips, I certainly will share that. If we superimpose that triangle on here, the nice thing about the software also is we can slow down the footage in our software here. I'm using Adobe Premiere Pro, but you don't have to use that. There's lots of other good softwares out there. But if I slow down that footage, you can watch that arrow go through the air because of the Luminox. So just like the footage is a very valuable tool, the Luminox is a valuable tool too. I have Luminox on almost every arrow that I own. I have one that I have to replace a Luminox on, but generally speaking, I have Luminox on every arrow that I have, and those Luminox are, I even put on my practice arrows so that I can see. It helps the arrow show up in the target. It is so much better though for filming because you can trace the path of that arrow, and you can watch that Luminox go through the air. You can slow it down, and you can see visually where you can see the arc of the arrow, and you can see the impact point a lot better. So consider getting Luminox too if you don't already have those. I would like to have more frames per second. This was filmed at 24 frames per second, but 60 frames per second, this camera will do it. That would be awesome. You'd have a little bit more than twice as many frames, so we could see the Luminox that much more going through the air. But I'm happy with this because if I was at 60 frames, I wouldn't be able to get as much light into the lens. There's camera reasons for that. But if you film at a higher frame rate, you are going to have less light in your lens. This hunt started very early in the morning. I always start out at 24 frames per second because then I can put my shutter speed at 50, and I've got more light on the lens, and therefore much brighter picture. So you have a much better picture at 24 frames per second. It would have been much darker and a lot grainier had we been shooting at 60 frames per second. So that's the reason I don't have as many frames. But if you're shooting out in the middle of the day, put 60 frames per second or so, or even more if you can. But if you have more frames per second, you're going to have a lot better image, or you're going to have a lot more frames of that Luminox going through there. But this will suffice for our purposes. I slow it down, and as you see that Luminox go through the air, we can see after the shot, I can show you that we can see from the first several frames, that arrow is almost there before the deer starts to duck. So if we slow it down frame by frame, though, we can see, in fact, the deer ducked the string. It did jump the arrow. Not an awful lot, but enough that it certainly affected the shot. So the people who commented about that, I thank you for that. I actually did not notice it. I had slowed it down a little bit, didn't notice a significant difference when I did it. But I hadn't really looked at it in this perspective. I've been looking for that. And sure enough, that's something that we need to consider here. So the other thing that I can do, though, that's cool about this software, I can superimpose the freeze frame of that doe, and I will do that now. We can superimpose the frame to show that doe standing there. And now I can cut out the impact, the point of impact, and show that because the Luminox stands right out. And I can superimpose the Luminox, bang, there you go. I can superimpose the Luminox, the point of impact, over the doe standing before the arrow even got there, if that makes any sense. In other words, what you're seeing in this frame, you are seeing the doe standing before she moved at all, basically before the arrow even enters the frame, okay? Where the doe was standing at the time I pulled the trigger is what this frame is. And on top of that, we can show the point of impact after the deer had ducked. So we know that the point of impact is actually in the spine. But if we look, that shot is still in the Bunjie triangle. if we look. Now I can superimpose the triangle on top of that as well, and we see that that shot is clearly within the Bunjie triangle. It is a little bit higher than I had hoped. It's not in the front corner of that spot. It is not dead on, but the boy, it's close. Boy, it's right in the pocket, and that is conclusive proof that the deer jumped the string, ducked the arrow a little bit. So what we can see from this is pretty obvious. The shot is a little bit high, but it is not, it's a shot that if had the deer not moved, it would have been a double lung shot. That deer would have run 50 to 60, 70 yards, something like that, and expired. Wouldn't have been a problem at all had the deer not jumped. So what do we do with this information? Well, there's a couple things I'm going to point out here. I've done videos on fast crossbows. I've done lots of videos about that subject, and people will tell me that, well, you need a faster crossbow. This crossbow that I have, Bunjie shoots about 305 feet per second on a good day, downhill. That's what I always say. That's my joke. But basically, Bunjie is not the fastest crossbow. In fact, it's probably one of the slower ones that you can get because it's 8 years old now, right? We're going back to 2010 when I bought that crossbow. So this is its 8th hunting season. And by modern crossbow standards, that's an old crossbow because, you know, the technology today is totally improved. And even the recurves that I shoot are way faster. They make 400 feet per second recurve crossbows. So this is a relatively slow crossbow. It's also an extremely loud crossbow by modern day standards. You can get compound bows that are much quieter. You can get a micro suppressor from Excalibur that is a recurve crossbow that shoots 335 feet per second, 355, something like that, and it's extremely quiet. So there are some things we can do to reduce the jumping of the string. And rather than update and go to a faster crossbow, that is not on my agenda, I probably will be doing a video down the road about quieting the crossbow. I've had a number of people ask me questions about that, and it is something I'm very interested in. I've done quite a bit of research on it, and I look forward to doing that video. That will be a springtime video, if that makes any sense, or an early summer video of next year, probably. That's most likely when that will be done. But I have a lot of ideas on it, and I am going to do a video about that. But the big thing that I want to say is, don't let this suggest to you that you have to have a brand new crossbow that's real quiet and really, really fast in order to go out and shoot deer. Because in the end, I easily recovered this deer. This was a proper 20-yard broadside shot that ended up in me recovering a deer very easily. And in the end, you can't ask for anything better than that. Think about what I got here. I got 40, 50 pounds of venison. I've stocked our freezer with doe number 1 because of this. I got great footage, had a great time in the woods, couldn't have asked for a better outcome. Got to see 7 deer and take one of them home with me. That, by anybody's definition, should be a good day in the woods. And that happened with this old, loud, slow crossbow. So you don't need the top-of-the-line crossbow to go out there and do the best you can. What you need to do is get really good with the crossbow you have. That's my opinion. So, and the other thing is I want to point out, even though this deer ducked and I recovered it no problem, 4 deer that I have shot have jumped the string total. Okay, out of all the deer that I've shot. There was a doe that I shot at down in the hemlocks. That deer, I actually thought it was at 30 yards, and I had made a mistake. And that's in my rangefinder videos. If you want to see that, I'll put cards on the screen here and wherever that is, and I'll put links in the description. But basically, that doe, I missed it because I shot right over its back. And that was because I was off by 10 yards. I was aiming high. The deer ducked a little bit, but that one I shot high. The button buck, that's in my jump the string videos that I did. That one ran about 50 yards, recovered it with no problem, but it did jump the string by 3 or 4 inches, and that was a big deal on a button buck that I thought was a fawn or whatever. I thought it was a doe. The other one was the Halloween doe a couple years ago. That one I spined, and that video is here on YouTube. So all 3 of these are on YouTube. You can go look at them. And then now this one, this will be the 4th deer. I want to be clear that that's out of 25 deer that Bunjie and I have killed, I believe. I don't know the exact number, but it's more than 24 deer. And I don't say that to brag about the number of deer. It's not a big risk. Keep that in mind. In the end, I certainly wouldn't go changing my equipment, you know, cashing it in and getting a different crossbow. That's not going to happen over something like this. That certainly isn't the case. So, but I think this is fun doing these little shot analysis videos. Please let me know your thoughts on these shot analysis videos in the comments. I did this before with the Maryland deer that I didn't recover, and I thought analyzing the shot, anytime you have a bad shot, you want to analyze it, figure out what you did wrong so you can correct the problem and do better next time. I've said that over and over on here. That's what makes you better at what you do, and it's not just crossbow hunting, it's everything in life. You got to be honest with yourself, admit what the problem is, and that way you can solve the problem and move forward. So doing these videos is helpful for me, and man, do I appreciate those of you who commented on the Facebook page and those of you who commented on the YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your comments about this, because it set me straight. I actually I edited the video, and I didn't think it was a bad shot. I didn't think that she had ducked the string. And, you know, I think if it hadn't been for the folks who commented on that, yeah, you know, I wouldn't have learned anything from this. This has taught me one thing, and that is I need to look at probably quieting the crossbow down a little bit and see if that makes a difference. It may remove that. On a 20-yard shot, I shouldn't have deer jumping the string at 20 yards, but it does happen. But if I can quiet the crossbow down a little bit, maybe that's the answer. So stay tuned to Death by Bunjie. Subscribe so you can see those videos down the road. I've got a lot more coming here. I've been catching up on videos. I've got hunts coming up here. I've got hunting footage, and I've got a couple other videos. I'm doing one on broadheads here not too long, and right at the beginning of the new year, and a lot of exciting stuff coming. So I hope you'll stick around. Hope you subscribe if you haven't already, and like the Facebook page, because that's a lot of fun too. Until next time, all hail Bunjie!